So with that in mind, let's get to it. Starting us off in at number 10, Miss Marvel powers. Once upon a time, Rogue permanently absorbed Carol Danvers' psyche and superhuman abilities when Danvers was Miss Marvel. As you can imagine, this screwed around quite a bit with Carol. Essentially, the two minds shared one body, but it gave Rogue a whole new set of abilities, including flight at wickedly fast speeds, the ability to repel bullets, superhuman strength, stamina, durability, reflexes, speed, and a precognitive sense. Damn. Not only did she gain her powers, but she also gained Carol's human Kree physiology, which made her incredibly resistant to most poisons and toxins. Eventually though, Charles Xavier was able to separate the two, but it has left a little bit of tension between Carol and Rogue over the years.
Number 9. Blast immunity. Due to the fact that they share genes and similar powers, Cyclops has blast immunity when it comes to his brother Havoc's blasts. His brother can devastate and obliterate anything he locks onto with his own shockwave-like blasts, which are emitted from his body, often more specifically his hands. Well, that is unless he targets Scott. Alex himself likewise has immunity to Scott's optic blast as well. Well, usually anyways. And to be clear, they can still attack one another, but the damage is simply negligible. It can be easily shrugged off due to their built-up immunity to each other. And when it comes to his own blast, Scott is completely immune. That's how he still manages to have eyelids and can even prevent his eyes from emitting optic blasts when they are closed shut. Though he does still often have to sleep with his ruby quartz visor to be safe. I always like to imagine him with like a ruby quartz like eye mask. I think that would be super cute. Probably never gonna see that in the comics though, might be too cute for Scott. Not for me though. Number 8. Energy blasts. While many get triggered when I use the term laser eyes in videos, the reality is I do it to poke loving fun at the inconsistency of Scott Summers' powers. It's part of his comic book history. We may refer to the energy he emits from his eyes as optic blasts now, but the truth is optic blast was actually a term coined for him after his powers were retconned. Originally, Scott's powers were explained in that his eyes absorbed energy from the sun, and that solar energy was actually what created the blast. Hot, solar energy. The only thing that could contain this solar energy was ruby quartz. This meant that his powers could be depleted and would sometimes need to be recharged. At one point he even managed to harness lunar energy to use instead, although lunar energy wasn't shown to be quite as effective, not quite as powerful. However, a lot of fellow comic book nerds had some questions regarding Cyclops' powers in terms of how they were supposed to work, and the source for his main ability was changed. Now his eyes would be known as portals to another dimension, overflowing with energy, where the logic of our world's physics did not apply. This made his powers appear more versatile, more limitless, and allowed writers more creative license with them. It also appeased fans, so just kinda weird. I love that we think that makes more sense. Oh, they're a portal to another dimension. No, yeah, that's fine, that's fine. Number 7. Visor. Okay, so we all know that Cyclops has a visor, and that his visor helps him flip the switch for his optic blasts. But what you might not know is that when he fires blasts in the comics and you see him clenching his fists, that's not just a flair for the dramatic. That fist clenching also has to do with controlling his powers. Say what? It's true. The controls for his visor are actually inside his gloves. They're comprised of a series of small buttons sensitive to pressure, allowing him to change the size of the opening in the visor and have very precise control over how much damage he wants to inflict, as well as where he wants to target that damage to. This may sound like a silly place to put said buttons. What if you accidentally clenched your fist in frustration? Until you realize this also gives Scott access to his powers even when restrained. Also means he can just take off his gloves and go to sleep with his visor on. So, pretty cool. Tie his hands, he can still use them. Put him to bed, he just takes off his gloves. Useless. Number 6. Superior DNA. Despite having siblings who appear more powerful than him, Mr. Sinister has always had and continues to have an obsession with Scott Summers. Why? Well, he's also obsessed with the whole Summers line, of course, but according to him, Scott is the genetic key to creating the most powerful mutant of all time. This is due to his superior DNA. But what does that mean? Well, I don't know exactly. I'm still waiting for Mr. Sinister's TED Talk on mutant DNA to help explain this whole thing in layman's terms. But for now, we just have to trust the villainous geneticist on this. I mean, I doubt he would have manipulated Scott's entire life on the scale that he has without facts to back up his claim. So he just has superior DNA. He just has it. Some people, they're just born with it. Some people, it's Maybelline. Number 5. Telepathic defense. While we're not always aware of this power for a multitude of heroes, I feel like it has become a secret must-have if you just want to be part of the X-Men team. Everyone on the X-Men seems to just have it without our knowledge until it just randomly comes up in the comics. But I guess that's what happens when you work alongside and fight against so many powerful telepaths. Actually, this ability was harnessed and strengthened by Scott through rigorous training with Professor Charles Xavier, and through his close connection to one of the strongest telepaths in the Marvel Universe, Jean Grey, and later his relationship with another accomplished telepath, Emma Frost. Frost. Although his telepathic defense didn't protect him from having Jean uncover his psychic affair with Emma Frost. So yeah. Ooh. Feel like that would have been a good time to flex that defense. Feel like, ooh, don't find out. Oh well, she would have found out anyways. He would have told her because he loves her. Number 4. Super Trigonometry. Due to his Danger Room training, Cyclops is insanely skilled when it comes to his optic blasts. I'm sure it's hard enough to just aim using your eyes, as I don't think it would actually be as intuitive as we all think. And even the flick of your eyes to a different direction mid-battle could mess with where you are targeting. You'd also have to be quite focused. Scott is not only skilled when it comes to targeting with his blasts in general, but he can also bounce his optic blasts off surfaces, knowing which angles to approach in order to bounce the blasts around in a less direct manner, avoiding obstacles and catching his opponents unawares. And in fact, firing his optic blast in a specific direction also requires a lot of control with his visor, as his eyes don't really allow him to focus a blast. It's often depicted that his visor is actually more where specific targeting comes in. I think he's got like panels that allow him to like adjust the angle. Part of this skill is practicality, and part of it is mind math, known as his super trigonometry skills. You do not want to play pool with Cyclops if he's using his blasts. He will beat you. He will definitely beat you. Ooh, Hawkeye versus Cyclops in pool, who would win? These are the questions. Number 3. Black Vortex. The Black Vortex is a construct that allows those who possess it to unleash their full cosmic potential. In Cyclops Volume 3, a younger version of Cyclops from the past was working with his dad Corsair and the Starjammers, who were actually tracking the Black Vortex, and Cyclops ended up being imbued by its energy after he and his teammates, young Iceman and Groot, became trapped on the ship where the Vortex was and had to fight their way out. They all decided to submit to the Vortex, and in so doing were granted its cosmic power, becoming the most powerful versions of themselves. Cyclops himself had an awesome suit that appeared to allow him to channel his blast through his eyes, his head, his neck, and his chest. And instead of his visor, he's actually wearing a mask, implying that he has more control over his blast ability. Also, Iceman looks like an ice elf, and it's like super cute and awesome. I just love a good ice elf. Also that hair, he has such nice long hair. Elves are so cute. Number 2. Breaks adamantium. During the Age of Apocalypse storyline, Cyclops and Wolverine end up on opposite sides of the battle. Cyclops found himself temporarily allied with Apocalypse, and although in falling for the rebel and prisoner Jean Grey felt like he might be switching sides, this all ended up happening not quite fast enough. He came to blows with Logan, known as Weapon X in this alternate timeline, who showed up and fought to free Jean by himself. Unsurprisingly, once again, even in this alternate timeline, Jean was a huge part of these two's dislike for one another, and without the mutual cause of Xavier and the X-Men to unite them, their fight became a brutal one. Cyclops lost an eye and proved the power of his blast when he ended up breaking through Logan's adamantium-coated skeleton, severing his hand. Was it the left hand or the right hand? I feel like in comics, I feel like it was the left hand, but that's some real trivia for you. Tell me which hand it was. Number 1. Spirit Bomb. What's better than optic blasts? Happiness blasts! Yep, Scott one time used his power to channel happy thoughts through his eyeballs in order to stop an alien invasion, with a little help of course from his friends. This was back in the 70s in Volume 1 of Uncanny X-Men. Of course it's from the 70s. A race of aliens known as the Xenox threatened to destroy the Earth using the proximity of their piloted homeworld's gravity, but they had one huge weakness: their fear of positive emotions. Meaning that when Charles Xavier channeled all of Earth's positive thoughts and passed them telepathically onto Jean, who in turn passed them on to Alex Summers, who boosted them with cosmic rays, and passed them on to Cyclops, whose eyes they came out of in a beam of hot and awesome intensity, which was then cooled somewhat by Iceman as the beam made its way straight to the Xenox, the invaders were successfully scared off, defeated. Man, that's a lot of passing. That's like, these guys should play like sports more, I think. They'd be so good at it. And that's how Cyclops' Spirit Bomb ability saved the planet. Sure, he needed help, but geez, what a plot. So yeah, he can use his eyes to channel other things sometimes. Fun fact. Thanks for watching, Nerd Squad. I hope you learned something new about Scott Summers, one of the most iconic X-Men, for good or for bad. Regardless of your opinion of his character, he really is one of the central players when it comes to the X-Men team and many of their storylines.
And at number 10, thermochemical energy. Let's start off this list by addressing the basics behind Sam's powers. He possesses the ability to generate something called thermochemical energy from his body, releasing it from his skin. This is energy that allows for the mutant to thrust himself and propel his body through the air, not dissimilar to a rocket. In the early days, he was only able to emit this energy from his feet and his legs, but nowadays his skills have improved tenfold, and he can release this energy from any part of his body, but we'll dive into more of that a bit later on. And at number 9, superhuman durability. This one is kind of a given when your mutant power is literally flinging yourself through the air at dangerously fast speeds. When using his powers, Sam's durability increases significantly, all thanks to the energy field that forms around his body. When not using his powers though, he's as vulnerable as a regular old human being. Despite what he's learned in his training, of course. I mean, that'd come in pretty nifty. Like, imagine you just wanted to show off to your friends and then you're just like, I'm gonna shoot myself into a wall and then break through it like the Kool-Aid Man and live to tell the tale. And at number 8, willpower. Shooting oneself through the air is no light matter. Is that a pun? I guess. If you think about it, it could be potentially fatal for Sam to do so, but that's where this facet of his powers come in. He is able to maneuver his body, control his speed, and change his direction solely through sheer willpower. This could potentially answer why our next number has been a question for those of you who are Cannonball fans.
Number 7. Super Jump. This ability is tied to his incredible strength and durability. Because he is both strong and durable, he is able to use his strength to push himself off the ground and leap great distances. And it doesn't hurt him because of his durability. He could jump up to certain buildings or is able to jump off very high points and land without even a scratch. All of those traits definitely come in handy for any superhero. And not even all superheroes don't even have that. So the fact that Luke Cage does makes life a little bit easier for him when he goes out. To protect the city. Also, who would want to be able to jump great distances? I mean, that'd be awesome. Just jumping around the city. A guy can dream.
Up next, number 6, flight. Duh, right? But Sam's ability to fly is one that has a history. Now in the early days, the character wasn't able to stop himself once he throttled himself into the sky and began to fly. Despite being able to maneuver in order to fully stop, he would have to find an object strong enough to force him to stop by holding onto it or straight up crashing into it. Or he would keep flying until his powers ran out of energy, as if he were some sort of propeller plane puttering out of gas. But now, after years of practice, the character can stop himself without having to resort to those tactics. I guess practice does make perfect.
Number 5, acute senses. Now you may be thinking, are you okay? Hypersenses are a good thing. However, not when they get to the point where they overwhelm you. Sometimes on rare occasions, when it behooves the plot, T'Challa's abilities can be a bit of a hindrance rather than a help. So even though other characters are rocking their acute senses in regular situations, sometimes T'Challa can't. Sometimes they play this off as because they're so acute, stronger than other people's. That's why he is king. That's not true, but it still sounds as legit as anything else, when it comes to the fluctuating scale of his senses. Now this does actually make sense, but it comes down to a matter of consistency.
And at 4, King of the Dwarves. Alright, this one is a bit obscure, but back in What If Volume 2 Issue 12 from 1990, in a story titled What If the X-Men Stayed in Asgard, the one in which Storm becomes the new goddess of thunder, Sam ends up staying too. And he falls in love with Kindra, the daughter of Eitri, the Dwarf King. The fellow that Peter Dinklage played in the MCU in Avengers Infinity War. Eitri dies later on in a battle, and Sam ends up taking on the mantle of the King of the Dwarves, under the name of Sam the First. One can assume that the title comes with the perks Eitri had, which was an expertise on forging weapons and an extended lifespan, the latter likely being what Sam would have inherited. And to be fair, considering that when the X-Men were in Asgard, Cannibal pretty much saved Odin's life, so he definitely has earned the respect of the Asgardians enough to take up
And that is something that a lot of people might not know about him. But, some probably already do.
Moving on to number 2, energy absorption. Cannibal can absorb and redirect energies from others. In Uncanny X-Men issue 341 from 1997, he took on Gladiator, aka Kalark, the warrior from the Shi'ar Empire, the Shi'ar Imperial Guard leader, who gives off some serious Superman vibes, might I add. Gladiator is a pretty strong dude. When fighting him, Sam was able to absorb his punches and redirect their energy force to use as an attack. That's not the only thing that he can do when it comes to energy absorption though. He can absorb outside kinetic energy to add to his own energy supply, making our next number even more powerful. And at number 1, his blast field. Perhaps the coolest thing that Cannonball can do is that he can manifest his energy as an impenetrable and practically indestructible blast field. Not only does this act as a very specific force field of sorts that protects his body incredibly well, he can also do a whole lot of other neat stuff with it. He can extend the energy to encompass him like a personal shield, extend it far enough to protect others under that shield, and he can shape it in various ways. He's done so to imprison foes in the past. And when he absorbs outside kinetic energy, Sam has used it to increase the power of his own attacks and blows, and can even create explosive shockwaves upon impact. But it is important to note that anything he does with this blast field takes a lot of concentration. He's essentially emitting this energy and actively concentrating on not blasting off, so that he doesn't propel himself into the air when he uses it.
Number 10. Immune to mystical attacks. When you're a superhero, you need to be prepared for pretty much anything. There are a wide array of different types of villains that can come your way. This of course includes magic. So T'Challa worked to find a way to render himself immune to mystical attacks as a way to deal with Doctor Doom. Cause one must never forget that Doctor Doom is a master of science and magic, for he is Doom, and he doesn't discriminate. He has no time for science versus magic pettiness. So T'Challa got an alchemical upgrade that made him able to detect, hide from, and be impervious to mystical attack. Now mileage on this varies. For some it's cool, he saw a problem and a weakness and he solved it. But for others it's like, well, isn't this like when you're playing on the playground and the kid is like, nuh-uh, you can't hit me because suddenly I have immunity. T'Challa can already do a lot, so for some this was overkill. Number 9. Reanimate the dead. Oh yes, Black Panther is a necromancer and actually king of the dead. So he can raise the dead and create and command a zombie army, which may not sound like the most heroic ability, but I guess it's all in how you use it. He was anointed as king of the undead, and with that came all of these mystical abilities. The thing with an ability like this is not only does it feel like it skews villainously, but it also is something that changes the scope of many conflicts. I mean, there are dead people everywhere, so any conflict is just potential zombie horde, or maybe at least zombie gang, or henchman, or wait, heroic, okay, zombie sidekick. Number 8. Humanoid Panther. Earth X is one of the well-remembered alternate universe Marvel stories, a dystopian world where a mutagenic virus has run rampant, courtesy of, you guessed it, Reed Richards. The way these mutations manifested varied, but in Black Panther's case, he became a panther. A human panther. Panther Man. Catman. It's hard to be a menacing Catman. I mean, you can push and make a credible case, but it's an uphill battle. The whole story was pretty interesting though, so actual Panther Black Panther fit right in. He fit right in. Marvel is currently mining its past successes, so there is a follow-up series following some miscellaneous characters and kind of a prequel to Earth X, and so far it's pretty solid.
In at number 7, his power levels vary. Over the years, Sam's powers have varied wildly. As we mentioned earlier, in the beginning, Sam was only capable of emitting thermochemical energy from his legs and feet. And while his ability to manipulate his blast fields are pretty consistent, more on those later, the full range of his powers have been speculated. At his peak, we've seen him plummet to the ground from a high altitude and completely devastate several city blocks. He's also faced foes that are considered quite strong in the Marvel Universe. One thing is for sure though, when he applies thrust to his powers, there is a significant hike in what he can do, like increase his strength enough to lift over a ton of weight.
Number 6. Mangaverse. So on Earth X, T'Challa was a literal Panther Man. In the Mangaverse, oh, it's so much better. So he's a dude with a pet panther who can summon spirits, and when he does so, him and his panther combine into Black Panther. Again, a Panther Man, but this time a dude literally fused with the cat. He could also become the Falcon, cause why not? Summoning spirits and animal transfiguration. Practically the same thing. I can't think about any of this without thinking about Manimal.
Number 5. Enhanced Speed. This power is not one that immediately comes to mind when you think of Luke Cage, but he does technically have it. Because of his strength, he's able to push his body a lot farther than the average human. Now, he's not as fast as people with super speed, but he would still be near the top of the list. Plus, he could run through things and it would not really hurt him. Unless it was some sort of adamantium wall or alien metal or something along those lines, then yeah, it might hurt him a little bit, but he'd bounce back. He is super healing, he's all good, you don't have to worry about Luke Cage.
Number 4. Spirit Energy Constructs. So back to King of the Dead. Not only can T'Challa raise a zombie army, but if your body is no more than just, well, you know, it's done, he can raise your spirit and create a kind of physical construct body for you to inhabit. So you'll be corporeal and be able to do some damage. That's intense. This is high sorcery. Scary T'Challa. Let the dead rest. But what he really does with this is create a magic spirit of ectoplasm that can affect both our physical plane and the nether realm. Plus it looks cool.
Moving on to number 3, Biokinetic Blasts. One of the many tricks Cannonball has pulled over the years when utilizing his thermochemical energy field propulsion is that he can create biokinetic blasts out of his hands, like concussive blasts. It takes a lot of concentration to channel it, but it has proven to be an effective attack. In addition to this, he was trained in hand-to-hand combat by Cable and has become an efficient fighter that way.
Number 2. Ghost Panther. The Infinity Warps universe. More amalgams, but this time with other characters within the Marvel universe. So here we have a fusion of Black Panther and Ghost Rider, specifically Johnny Blaze. Here we have a young T'Challa who was arrogant and rebellious and exiled from Wakanda after getting in some beef with his dad. So he went to America where he met Jericho Simpson, who became his new mentor and renamed him Johnny Blaze. Just cuz. He took up stunt work. But then while doing a stunt, he felt his father dying, which broke his concentration, so he died too. Then he was revived and offered Ghost Rider's powers. Just cuz. He wasn't down for it at first, but accepted when it gave him the opportunity to take on his father's killers. Number 1. Hypercosmic Awareness. So Black Panther has been exposed to the mind of Galactus, and this combined with his exposure to the Heart Herb, well, it changed him. He was able to see the confines of the Marvel Universe, and eventually also the multiverse. So he could have visions of things occurring outside of the 616. What good does this do? Well, it's great when there's imminent doom. Otherwise, it would just be annoying. Oh man, I know that Peter B. Parker got a gym membership. This information, the world needs it. Alert the media. Black Panther, gossip monger. That would never happen, but it's fun to think about.
Number 10. Falcon's wings. Sam has had many versions of his famous flight suit, the most notable being the ones from Black Panther and the modified version created by Tony Stark. These wings allow Falcon to fly at speeds up to 250 miles per hour, which is as fast as a Tesla Roadster can go. Equipped with a magnetic drive that creates the thrust needed to get him airborne, the suit also comes equipped with a GPS jamming device, vibranium microwave capable of resisting small firearms, and, in the past, it has also featured a Talon-like grappling line. After some modifications made by Tony Stark, the suit's wings were also made of full vibranium, making them much stronger and capable of absorbing large amounts of force. Number 9. Feather projectiles. As seen in the cartoon Superhero Squad and a few other forms of media, the Falcon is able to eject his feathers from his suit and then throw them at his enemies. Being made of vibranium, these projectiles are incredibly hard and can do some serious damage. Number 8. He is in peak human condition. Now, thanks to years of intense training with Captain America, Sam is now considered to be at the peak of human condition. His strength is nothing to joke about, as he is able to send crossbones flying with a single force kick. He was able to break steel chains that tied him to a tank, and he was able to bend metal bars with his bare hands. He is also strong enough to lift at least twice his body weight and can press lift 480 pounds. And don't even get me started on his physical endurance. He continued to function in spite of getting stabbed in the chest by Zemo's sword, and continued to function after being set on fire from one of AIM's agent's flamethrowers while ripping his costume. Man, I wish I was like that. I have trouble even walking up a flight of stairs.
Number 7. Isotope E exposure. Initially, Quicksilver was only able to run at the speed of sound, but after an exposure to Isotope E, Quicksilver was able to run at speeds of up to Mach 10, which, combined with the power to resist friction and kinetic impact by vibrating his molecules, enable him to walk on water, even running across the Atlantic Ocean. Not a bad augmentation by any means.
Number 6. He is a aerialist master. It's very well known that Sam is an excellent flyer. His superhero name is the Falcon, so you kind of hope so, right? Now, thanks to many years of experimentation with his wings, he has mastered the art of flying and fighting in the air. So much so that he is considered one of the best aerial fighters in the Marvel world, exceeding the skills of other flyers such as Iron Man and Ms. Marvel.
Number 5. Time displacement copies. After his sister Scarlet Witch removes most of his powers, Quicksilver receives some new abilities thanks to the Terrigen Mist, a naturally occurring mutagen. These abilities include being able to displace himself in time and move into the future, allowing him to create copies of himself. Notably, he used this ability to take down Magneto in Son of M number 5, overwhelming him with 2 additional copies of himself. Evidently, they shared some form of thought process, even continuing each other's sentences. Probably the coolest power he had, in all honesty.
Number 4. Human-Bird Hybrid. Now, although we're primarily focusing on Sam Wilson, I thought I should mention that there is another hero that uses the name of Falcon, and that is Joaquin Torres, the Arizona-born sidekick to Captain America. As a result of Carl Malice's experiments, Joaquin was turned into a Falcon-human hybrid, giving him the ability to fly by flapping his arms, since they've been partially turned into wings. Now, this has obviously affected his personality as well, giving him enlarged eyes, bird-like talons on both his hand and feet, as well giving him a very distinct feature that I will discuss very shortly.
Number 3. Navigation via vibrations. Another advantage of Quicksilver's abilities is that he's able to detect vibrational patterns in his environment, effectively enabling him to be his own compass. This skill is particularly advantageous when in open areas and allows him to maintain orientation while traveling at high speed. Nothing too special to say about that, but a very useful ability.
Number 2. A cybernetic implant. Now back to Sam. In his brain, he has an implant that enhances his ability to see what birds see, and I will talk on that more next. And that allows him to transmit what he sees into a data storage unit that converts those visuals into images and videos. Now this is great for some stealthy surveillance and espionage type missions, as it allows for the other members of his team to know exactly what they're going up against ahead of time. And number 1, avian telepathy. Now in my opinion, this is the coolest power that Sam has, and that's why I put it at number 1. Thanks to the Red Skull and the Cosmic Cube, Sam was given the ability to telepathically link with birds. This ability is strongest with his companion Redwing, but he's also able to extend it to other birds, allowing him to see the world through their eyes, and it also allows him to control the bird that he's connected to. Now the coolest thing is that this also applies to all avian-like creatures, even the inhuman bird people seen on Airy or Sky Island. However, this link to them is very limited and restricted to low-grade telepathic readings.
Starting us off in at number 10, he is resistant to hypnosis. The Super Soldier Serum gives Cap immunity towards specific toxins and accelerates his metabolism, but it also gives him resistance to hypnosis, which is really cool, except for the fact that the resistance to hypnosis is kind of moot in a few ways when you're incredibly vulnerable to manipulation in the first place, and that is something that Cap definitely is. Now before you Cap fans get upset over this, it's true. Cap has on numerous occasions been incredibly susceptible and responsive to manipulation. He's been manipulated into doing things for Hydra and other foes on several occasions. Hell, a version of Steve was going around shouting "Hail Hydra" in 2017's Secret Empire after all, guys. I know it wasn't the real Steve Rogers or the 616 Steve Rogers, but come on. Look at how he was manipulated by Hydra when they covertly were running S.H.I.E.L.D. to secretly do their bidding in the MCU. Yeah, ultimately Rogers just wants to serve the greater good, but sometimes we can be naive about it. I mean, it's not totally a bad quality to have, to see the good in everybody and want to trust people.
Number 10. Doing math for chaos. Many iterations of the Scarlet Witch have the ability to wield chaos magic. But in the 1610 universe, that being the Ultimate Verse, Wanda had a bit of a different way of using her powers. And this way also amplified her magic. She had to do math. She would have to calculate the mathematical probability of the effect she intended to create. So this meant she would have to create increasingly complex formulas to create more complex effects. Just sucking all the fun out of magic. I'm kidding, math is important, but it's far more fun to imagine just willing things into existence with your mind. This was one of the most unique depictions of the Scarlet Witch's powers to date. And while complicated, it was a type of complicated most could understand, and it definitely made some people not want her powers anymore.
Number 10. Skilled Spy. Jessica Drew has been trained in espionage by Hydra and S.H.I.E.L.D. and actually is a fantastic spy. Her training likely also came in handy in the Spider-Verse when she infiltrated the Inheritors, going undercover and impersonating Morland's lover on Loomworld, who apparently just happened to look exactly like her. Weird. Talk about taking one for the team. Her assistance in the Spider-Verse storyline, however, went to show just how formidable a foe Jessica Drew can be. All I'm saying is you would not want to get on her bad side. So wait, when Veronica the Skrull Queen was posing as Jessica Drew, when she went on like a spy mission for S.H.I.E.L.D., would we call that spyception? Spies on spies on spies? Number 9. Super Sleuth. When you think of Jessica Drew, you may think of her more spider-like abilities, but what you might have forgotten is that she's actually a registered private investigator. That's right. At one point, Jessica Drew moved to San Francisco and worked hard to get her private investigator license. Not only that, but she was good at it too. During this time in her life, everything felt like it was actually going super right. She opened her own successful PI business, her vigilante persona was being praised by the city as she was referred to as the Dark Angel of San Francisco, and she fell in love with her landlord, David. Unfortunately, the last part didn't end up working out after David discovered that she was a superhero. And after a fight with Morgan Le Fay, she ended up comatose. And once she was revived, powerless. Harsh. What a harsh time. Not surprised she's a super sleuth, considering that she was kind of inspired by Nancy Drew. Number 8. Insane amount of endurance. Jessica Drew is one of the few heroes who is known for fighting crime even while very visibly pregnant. I mean, sure, other women have probably done it. Sue Storm has also probably fought while she was, with child, but none have gone quite as hard as Spider-Woman. While checking out an off-world maternity ward, a very, very pregnant Jessica found herself fighting hard as it was invaded by Skrulls. I kid you not. Not only is that impressive enough, but she kicked some serious butt and almost handily defeated them until she went into labor. She managed to get away with some doctors, give birth, and return with stitches as she had just had a C-section delivery, and take out the rest of the Skrulls. Like, I'm all for girl power, but this is an impossible level of endurance. What is going on in these comics? Oh my goodness. I'm trying to think of all the pregnant women that I have known in my life, and I'm like, could you imagine? Although they're rage. They sometimes can rage like crazy, so maybe it could happen.
Number 9. Fortune Teller. There have been many iterations of Wanda across the multiverse, for it is vast and all-encompassing. So it is on Earth 1000, Wanda is a fortune teller going by the name Mistress Wanda, which makes you think that maybe she has another side business going, like Good Omens. So long story short, she appeared briefly in one of those events wherein characters are battling across the multiverse, in order to keep it together. She appeared in Domination Factor 4.7 in the issue Lost in Space-Time, dealing with fallout of Loki having tricked the Avengers and the Fantastic Four into altering the course of history. The heroes need to possess versions of themselves in these altered universes to right the wrongs. So it is that Wanda ends up taking over the body of her fortune teller counterpart mid-reading. Because is there any better time?
And at number 9, Capwolf. Captain America can become a werewolf, or at least he has become a werewolf in the past. He briefly had werewolf powers in 1992 during a 6-part story arc titled Man and Wolf in Captain America issue 402. In the woods outside of Massachusetts, X-Men member Wolverine finds a dead body, so he calls Cap in for assistance. While investigating, Steve ends up uncovering a town containing a bunch of lycanthropes, and of course, in the process, he himself is transformed into a werewolf. It's Capwolf, a vicious superhero with all the powers of Captain America and all the powers of a werewolf. Despite it not sticking, this wasn't the only time that a Captain America has become a werewolf. Sam Wilson would experience a similar situation years later while operating under the mantle. It's kind of fun. Moving on to number 8, his musical abilities. Okay, so this one is a little silly, and it's an almost ability, sort of. Back in 1985, we almost added Broadway musical star to the list of things that Captain America has done. Cap was meant to have his own musical with an estimated budget of $4 million. The concept actually sounds a little amazing. Also, this was outside of the comics, guys. The story would have followed Steve Rogers suffering through a midlife crisis, lulz, then running off on a mission to rescue his girlfriend from a terrorist who kidnapped her. As you can imagine, a lot of people thought it was a terrible idea. Needless to say, nothing came from this idea aside from a poster advertising it in comic books, looking for girls aged 10 to 14 for the cast to play what was described as Cap's special friend. Yikes. Keeping on that silly train, that brings us to our next number. In at 7, he can be a convincing Nazi. Cap has been a Nazi more than most heroes, and definitely more than any of his Avengers peers. That's kind of a skill, right? The ability to be a convincing Nazi? Yeah. Aside from Secret Empire in 2017, the whole thing was a different Steve Rogers, it's a long story. Cap has also raised his fascist flag in 1965 and in 1979. The former was in Tales of Suspense, issue 67, and the latter in Captain America, issue 234. Both times he snapped out of it though before the conclusion of the story. So, not a permanent Nazi, but Nazi for a day. Eeeh. Still bad. 6. Super racism. Captain America used to be quite racist back in the 40s, as in he literally used to go around shouting, I quote, "White America is a strong America." Wow. Now this is very much a product of the wartime comics, where comics were largely used as propaganda even before the US entered into the fray of World War II. Cap and other heroes, including DC's Superman and Batman, found themselves saying pretty terrible things and doing pretty terrible things with other races and cultures, including the Japanese and the Chinese, who were largely targets in pop culture media at that time. So why is this on a powers list? Because characters the likes of Captain America have great influence over their readers, especially considering he is such an important patriotic symbol. What he does in his panels matter. While this is obviously no longer the case, Cap is anything but racist these days, it is still a startling panel to see.
Number 7. Glide. Many think that Spider-Woman can fly in the comics, which would be pretty cool, given that she doesn't have Spider-Man's famous web shooters. However, this is not true, she cannot fly. What she can do is glide. Glide, 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 glide. This power of gliding through the air looking like she is flying is granted by her suit design, and is still pretty cool all in all. She once had a fight with the Hornet in mid-air and kicked his butt, which he definitely deserved, by the way. Jessica Drew is the only Spider-Woman to have this design. Many different Spider-Women have come and gone after her, but while those other Spider-Women may have adopted the mantle, they all adopted pretty different suits. I think one of them had like webbing, but a lot of them have like legs coming out of them. It's creepy. I kinda like it though. Number 6. Psychic Shields. Jessica had psychic shields implanted by S.H.I.E.L.D. and some strong ones too apparently. These shields allow her to resist attacks from 3-in-1, who once joined with Emma Frost in an attempt to take on a future alternate version of Jean Grey, and allowed her to resist an attack from Professor Xavier, which of course also surprised him, leaving her standing after many others were knocked down. Pretty impressive, Jess.
Number 8. Venomverse Wanda. Of course, if you were in the Venomverse, you either had Venom symbiote powers or had been consumed by a poison, and hence were a poison version of the character. In this universe, Wanda was a poison who worked for Lord Doom, and seemed to have retained her magical abilities, but with all of those of a poison as well. So she is essentially subsumed, but all of her memories and the like remain intact, because that is part of the process. So is this Wanda always just here for Doom? It's a pairing that makes sense if you know he's not manipulating and influencing it like that one time. Let their love be natural. Number 7. Telekinesis/telepathy. Hopping over to the MCU and one of the most popular versions of the Scarlet Witch to date. This Scarlet Witch has a different power set than her comic book counterpart. As a result of exposure to the Mind Stone, she has developed a form of telekinesis and telepathy. However, the way it is animated and used is slightly reminiscent of her comic book powers. This Scarlet Witch is still extremely powerful, and according to recent rumors by Kevin Feige, she has been elevated to Strongest Avenger, which, if that is the case, 100% legit and earned. We should all be afraid of the Scarlet Witch. Also, did you see what culture did heroic Thanos? I hate them. They're like the worst. Number 6. Weapon Hex. Weapon Hex comes to us from Warp World, a world of characters mashed together after Gamora, wielding the Infinity Gauntlet, folded the universe in half in the Soul Gem, where she had trapped people's souls. So Weapon Hex is a fusion of the Scarlet Witch and Laura Kinney, aka X-23. Her name is still Laura Kinney though. She is meant to be a vessel for both science and magic, and she is trained to be a weapon. But the love she receives ultimately gives her a kinder and more understanding disposition. There's a lot of X-23 in this version and only a little Wanda. Mostly it's there in the powers, which are written on her body, which is pretty neat and a cool design. Number 5. Hex Powers. So when the Scarlet Witch was first introduced, she had what were called Hex Powers. These powers weren't very defined, except that she could impact probability, which was something writers at the time absolutely loved, because it meant that her powers could be used for literally whatever they wanted. Basically, she could do whatever the plot needed her to, and this would go on for years until the new aspect of her powers, Chaos Magic, would be introduced, which brings us to number 4. Number 4. Chaos Magic. Now, instead of just hex powers, she had the ability to channel and wield chaos magic. This was defined by writer Kurt Busiek. This was because the demon Chthon has manipulated her mutation at birth. This was to allow her the ability to wield magic. This was meant to explain some of the things she had done in the past that went beyond just, oh, she can use hexes and manipulate probability. This meant that she could perform complex spells given enough concentration and practice and training. And during this time period, she would even resurrect Wonder Man. Hooray? Number 3. Resist the Phoenix Force. In some of her more recent iterations, before her last retcon that removed her mutant abilities, and history kinda, and made her one of the second most wanted people for crimes against mutant kind, this was because of the No More Mutants thing. Doesn't matter her mental state or the years she genuinely thought she was a mutant. No, only tyranny. I mean, hooray, mutant pride. Seriously though, that incident is a great source for conflict, and it's cool to see it mined. So Wanda was shown to be able to resist the Phoenix Force and be so powerful herself that she was someone the Phoenix Five were actually afraid of. Valid. The Scarlet Witch is pretty terrifying. So few people can wield the Phoenix Force, yet alone contend with it.
Number 10. Temperature Resistance. The crazy thing about this power isn't so much that it exists, but that it appears to have always existed. Even before Beast had his iconic fur, he was resistant to cold. A fur coat makes sense for this, but his randomly being cold resistant doesn't really make a ton of sense without it. Although this is also back when Beast had an insane healing factor and could heal from almost any injury, similar to Wolverine or Deadpool. A temperature resistance makes sense for a furry character who would be insulated, or even a character who I guess is known for their endurance. However, the weird carryover of this power as Beast has changed over the time, from having a healing factor to a blue fur coat, is just kinda strange. Number 9. Magic. In the 2016 series of All New X-Men, we see Hank turn from scientific pursuits to those of a more magical variety. What makes this fairly silly is his sort of resentment and disbelief surrounding magic, as he specifically attempts to use magics himself. It was a weird exploration of his character when writers decided to incorporate a bit of magic into his world, as Hank has always been known as a man of books, and maybe of fantasy in a more romantic or literary sense, but certainly not in a magical superpower sense, so... Number 8. Handy feet. One of the powers that I've always found to be both silly and useful is Beast's enhanced dexterity. He can use this skill in combat to turn himself into a skilled acrobat, dodging blows, stealthily leaping across rooms, gracefully landing where he is needed, and helping in the fray to defeat the enemy. But he can also use this skill to perform mental tasks with his feet. Why? Well, usually because he's busy reading. He's used his feet to type, pour liquids out of beakers, and even once used them alone to fight as he was trying to read during the instigation. How one could truly focus on both, I can't even comprehend. I guess because of his enhanced intellect? Or maybe he was just like me when I try to multitask while reading, and he's just like stuck reading the same sentence over and over and over without it sinking in. But maybe he just didn't want to admit that. So it looks like he's reading, but really he's just reading the same sentence.
Number 7. Toe claws. So while X-23 has 2 bone claws that emerge from her hands, she also has another that emerges from the front of her toes, just in between. And these were coated in adamantium. This toe claw could prove very useful, and does. Who's expecting an attack from that low down? Very few people. Also, one good slice of the Achilles tendon and that's it. Crippled for life. It makes kicks all the more deadly too. You can get so much power behind your leg. Listen to me, I'm really pushing for this toe claw.
Number 6. Giant hands and feet. Originally, Beast started out as a normal-ish looking man, simply having large hands and feet, which he was ridiculed for in school, so I guess it's not completely normal. Visibly, this appeared to be the only super thing about him. Granted, he was also super strong, super agile, and speedy at the time as well. He also had that advanced intellect that we love. But while looking mostly normal, this weird feature that seemed to come along with his mutation and powers was an odd one. Namely because other mutants with similar enhancements to speed and strength and agility don't really seem to share it. They don't really have like large hands or large feet. I know not all mutants are the same, trust me, do I know that, but still, it was a weird trait to give Beast, especially when you would expect someone with large hands and feet to be, more clumsy than dexterous. Yet Marvel decided to go the opposite way with it. Number 5. Psionic Blasts. In a fight against Archangel, Psylocke used this newfound power to knock him out. Her psionic blasts can be deadly actually, despite the fact that they don't really inflict physical damage. Instead, these blasts attack Psylocke's opponents mentally, though they can still inflict mental pain. Psylocke is also capable of wielding the psionic energy on such a level that she could create an explosion. Psionic explosions! Number 4. Minor pheromone manipulation. Sometimes heroes have powers that we really get to see in action, and these are the powers that always blow me away. For Hank, one such power is his ability to secrete pheromones which make members of the opposite sex become attracted to him. While it has been mentioned in a copy of the official handbook of the Marvel Universe X-Men edition from 2004, we have yet to see Hank really utilize it. He has had a fairly active love life, and Abigail Brand, who has been a longtime love of his, has even expressed an interest in starting a family. But it's more likely that it is simply Beast's personality and soft blue fur that have caused women to just fall for him, not his use of pheromone power. Unless there's something we don't know, and Beast is maybe just like a master manipulator. He's just secreting pheromones all the time and that's why it all happens. Oh my goodness. I'm not ready for that revelation. It'd be weird.
Number 3. Weapon Hex. Weapon Hex is the version of Laura Kinney that is an amalgamation of her and the Scarlet Witch, though the character retains her name and most of her backstory. What is largely changed is that she is meant to be the perfect vessel for the occult, and her powers have a magical slant to them as well. That's the Wanda in her. So Hex 23 is from Warp World, the world created when Gamora, wielding the Infinity Gauntlet, folded the realm of the Soul Gem in half, where she was keeping the character's souls. Weapon Hex was one of the characters who decided to stay mashed together when the amalgamation of their universe was revealed, and Weapon Hex even went on to become part of the Defenders team.
Number 2. Claws and Fangs. This addition to Beast's physique definitely makes sense as it came with the change of his appearance into a more beast-like and ape-like state, but it's still, it's kinda ridiculous, mostly because Beast doesn't really use either of these things. The juxtaposition of his calm and curious nature with his beast-like physique and features makes a lot of Beast-related powers and assets feel kind of misplaced, or I guess just wasted, because he doesn't really like to connect with them or utilize them that much. The same can be said about his long claws and features, which typically end up as just ornamental and used by writers to make Beast feel like even more of an outcast than he already does. Which is sad. I want him to just feel good about his appearance. I guess sometimes he does, but sometimes he doesn't. And he wants to cure himself, and I'm like, no, I'm conflicted. Number 1. Animal Instinct. Hank might view this trait as a weakness, oddly enough, but I would argue that it's not a weakness because it makes him stronger. It makes him do things he would not normally think to do. It makes him hesitate less. He would likely be able to apprehend more villains than not, catching them off guard with his sheer strength and speed and focus. He also might kill them, but they'd be stopped at least. But Hank fears his animal side, which alienates him from it and causes any instincts he taps into to be rebuked as opposed to embraced. Really, I think he just needs to take a page out of Wolverine's book, tap into his instincts, and let go a little bit more. Facing his fears would only make him stronger, I think, and eventually give him more control over a power that could be better utilized.
Number 10. Reattach limbs. Now, one of the powers Wolverine, and hence his clone, is most known for is the healing factor. This healing factor is meant to render them potentially immortal, but in the case of X-23 it also means that she can reattach limbs. They will rebond and perform as good as new. Certainly a useful trick, definitely faster than waiting for them to grow back, and less gross, although you can make that funny. Just look at Deadpool. Still, it says a lot that in her short life X-23 has already suffered such brutal injuries that this is a known fact. Sad times. Number 9, as mentioned, immortality. Now, one of the perks of an out-of-control healing factor, with perks being placed in quotation marks, is the potential to live forever. There's something about your cells constantly healing that allows you to not have to age in the same way others do. Instead of your cells decaying, you're just producing perfect copies. Because of this, you get the joy of living past all your friends and family and watching the inevitable march of time and potential destruction of all. At least in the Marvel Universe, you won't have to do it alone. Heck, Laurel will even be able to do it with a couple of people that she actually likes, like a little vampire coven, only with mutants. Which hero would you want to spend eternity with? If any. Eternity is a long time. Number 8, Gabby Kinney, aka Gabrielle Kinney, aka Honey Badger, aka Scout. Now, she is another of Wolverine's clones, and as such in a way a sister to X-23, but she showcases some of the powers Laura could have had things gone just a little bit differently. For example, Gabby has an insensitivity to pain. This was a result of further genetic experimentation on the part of Alchemax, and it's made her quite the dangerous little creature. A lot of barriers and restrictions are removed if one can't feel pain. There is an actual condition where people can't feel pain, and it's really dangerous. This is because you can get pretty badly hurt and not even know it. It also removes some of that innate fear factor that you know is necessary for our survival.
Number 7, astral projection. Using her telepathy, Psylocke can project her astral form, allowing her to explore the astral or physical plane outside of her body. While in the astral plane, she can use her abilities to alter the environment around her, and even create psionic weapons, much like she can while inhabiting her body on the physical plane. There was even a time when she was undetectable in her astral form. That being said, she can easily be harmed while in her astral form when facing those who are stronger than her, like in Uncanny X-Men Volume 1 when she went up against Mr. Sinister.
Number 6, poison immunity. Now, some of you may be saying, yes, we know about the healing factor. Fair enough. But the degree to which X-23 is immune to poisons is truly impressive. We're not talking you give her poison, she's felled, and needs to wait it out as her healing factor slowly cures her. No, we're talking it takes a massive dose in the first place to even have any effect at all. She's just operating at such an enhanced capacity that what would affect an average person won't affect her at all. Definitely useful as a being created as a living weapon, but also just for anybody. That would be a relief. For those of you who are really concerned about being poisoned.
Number 5. Doesn't need to sleep. Apparently, having his form change from ape-like to more feline-like not only stole a digit from Beast's hands, but also changed his sleeping patterns. He mentions this during Astonishing X-Men Volume 1, Issue 25. The issue starts off with Beast singing, and we follow him until he runs into Xavier Institute student Armor, aka Hisako Ichiki. She reminds him of her threat to shave Japanese obscenities into his fur while he sleeps if she caught him singing again, which obviously she has. Hank answers the threat by sharing with Hisako that he no longer really needs more than 2 hours of sleep a night. What? This might be a useful one for being pulled into a fight in the middle of the night or needing to keep watch, but it also just seems like such a random superpower to have as a byproduct of an outward change of physical appearance. Yeah, that's right, Beast micronaps apparently. He's got some small sleeping skills. Strange. Especially considering many cats that I've interacted with seem to be pretty sleepy creatures, so this doesn't really make a lot of sense to me.
Number 4. The Venomverse. Like pretty much every character, Laura Kinney was featured in the Edge of the Venomverse event, and stood out for some because of just how cool and intense her venomized Wolverine costume was. Fun fact, in the main verse when Wolverine died during the time we were pretending he was gone for good, Laura took up his mantle to honor him. And it was a legacy passing of the torch that some people really enjoyed, and are salty about how now she's gone back to being X-23. Some claim that it's being bumped back. Some even say that her name is a slave name. It gets intense out there sometimes. Now, unlike some characters who were essentially window dressing in the Venomverse, X-23 had a whole story arc. This involved a new origin where she managed to escape captivity thanks to bonding with the Venom symbiote, and as a result had a pretty good relationship with it. We got to see this in Edge of the Venomverse number 1, and for some it was an excellent primer for what was to come.
Number 3. Pilot. While it might not be as interesting as some of her other professions and power sets based around being a spy and, a ninja, way before any of that happened, back in the original Captain Britain Volume 1, Betsy was known for her skills as a pilot. Truth be told, we never really got to see said skills, but they were acknowledged by her brother Brian Braddock. Betsy seemed more to downplay them, and then while flying, a light kinda hit her and caused her to hallucinate, and then she crashed. Not really her fault, but it didn't really add any hype to this ability. Still, based on what Brian said in issue 8 of Volume 1, we can't assume that Betsy was an accomplished charter pilot. Just never really got to see a lot of it.
Number 2. Her training. Now when it comes to X-23, most think of her mutant abilities, but she is also highly intelligent. She has been trained to infiltrate with ease. It was for these reasons that she was trained as an acrobat, trained to speak multiple languages and master martial arts. All of this she can do because she has a far above average intellect. So she's more than just a ball of rage, far more. And number 1, Enigma Force, aka the Unipower, aka Captain Universe. Yes, X-23 got the powers of Captain Universe. I mean, that entity is down for whoever will bond with it, really. At first, Laura was reluctant to take on the Unipower, but she eventually did, and like most people with those powers, they get a sweet Captain Universe style costume upgrade, and they get to wield the power cosmic. While possessing the Enigma Force, one is essentially a god. The Unipower was interested in her because it wanted to make use of her healing ability. Their time together was brief, but for some fans, pretty memorable.
Number 10. Ninja Assassin Fighting Skills. Though she uses her telekinetic abilities a lot in a fight, and I mean a lot, Betsy doesn't need to rely on them to beat someone in hand-to-hand combat. Her skills as a ninja assassin have been reinforced on a few different occasions. At one point she was trained by the hand, but she also inhabited the body and, for a while, kind of the mind of Quanon, a skilled ninja assassin, whose body she swapped with in a controversial and pretty ridiculous storyline, and who also seemed to have purple hair, possibly even natural purple hair, as opposed to Betsy's original's body's dyed purple hair. Betsy also became such a skilled assassin that she even admitted during her time on Cable's X-Force that she was addicted to killing. So, she's like a super assassin. Anyways, she tries not to kill people anymore. Number 9. Telepathic Link and Twin Bond. This power feels like it's almost based off of folklore. Betsy and her twin brother Brian share a unique connection. They have a strong telepathic link to one another. This link has actually helped the twins to sense when the other is in danger and rush to their side to help them. People have often believed that the time shared in the womb actually allows twins in the real world to share an almost psychic link to one another, sensing one another's emotions or physical states, even while separated. Studies have even actually been conducted on this subject. aspect. And while I don't think it makes a lot of sense scientifically speaking, I know that my twin sisters have experienced some pretty freaky twin telepathy moments, so maybe there's a real world thing to this, I don't know guys. Beyond being linked to her brother, Psylocke has the capacity to be linked with just about anyone. When her mutant powers actually surfaced, she found herself instantly and overwhelmingly telepathically connected to millions of people, not having much control over her powers just yet. This caused her much grief initially, though it has proved a useful power throughout her development. Number 8. She's a spy. Psylocke is a master of shadows for many reasons, one including her prowess as a spy. She worked as a spy agent on the Psi division of Strike, the special tactical reserve for international key emergencies. Well, for a time. An oddly, conveniently cool acronym for what was basically MI6 with a wider net. During her time working as a Psi agent for Strike, she would plot to infiltrate the Hellfire Club. She worked on the Strike Force undercover, with her cover life being that of a working fashion model, pun intended. This was also the time we saw Betsy make a dramatic change to her hair. Up until this point it always matched her twin brother Brian, aka Captain Britain's blonde color, but she would then start dyeing it purple and never look back. Her purple hair has since become an iconic part of her look. Number 7. Telepathic resistance. The weird thing about this power is that it never seems to be fully explained. Some mutants train to get this and others just seem to possess a natural resistance to telepathy. Beast appears to fall more into the second category, cause you know, you can't be an X-Men unless you have some level of telepathic resistance. However, Beast's resistance to telepathy is kind of dumb because, well, he's not that great at it. It basically just means he is not openly vulnerable to telepathic influence, but when up against a powerful or potent telepath, or if someone can use his fears, like Cassandra Nova did against Beast, his resistance quickly breaks down. So this power is kind of a dumb one because it's just, well, it's not that useful. And after all, the X-Men are more often dealing with powerful telepaths than low-level ones, so. Number 6. Force fields. Beyond having the physical and tactical skills to take down an opponent, Psylocke can also guard against physical attacks when she wants to, and even shield herself from things like magical explosions or fire. Using her telekinesis ability, she can construct a force field around herself and others to protect from incoming attacks. It isn't an effortless ability, however, as it does require a lot of mental strength and focus on her part.
Number 5. Acute senses. Okay, you know about the senses, but did you know how precisely acute they are? This goes beyond being able to follow a scent, and instead dives into the realm of she can tell individualized things about a person from their scent. For example, if they have high cholesterol. And she can do this for hours afterwards, long after other creatures would have lost the scent. This of course makes her a super dangerous opponent if you're trying to hide from her, because you have to do so much more masking than just dousing yourself in Axe cologne. I covered myself in cologne, she'll never find me because I smell sauvage.
Number 4. Magic immunity. After Jamie Braddock resurrected Psylocke, she was brought back with some different abilities. While she no longer had her shadow teleportation power, she found she was now immune to telepathic or telekinetic interference, and Jamie even insisted that she had a resistance to magic, specifically reality-altering magic. He apparently had made sure she was brought back with these resistances, as he needed her in order to defeat the Forsaken. Number 3. Secondary mutation. This is apparently the power and ability that we have to blame, which has caused Hank so many changes over the years. He developed a secondary mutation as a result of consuming his serum, which he sought to protect from being stolen, and this caused him to mutate more, and caused him to enhance his mutation permanently. Long term, it is suspected that this has continued to affect the evolution of his mutation, causing him actually to also continue to change and awakening within Hank recessive genes in his DNA, which have caused him to revert to a more animal-like appearance. He's like a two-way evolution, embodying the strengths of those we evolved from and the advancements of the modern man, shown by his advanced intellect. This becomes in and of itself a little bit silly, though, when you realize that it means he went from ape to cat because of this. So I guess who knows where to next, because I would think, you know, maybe cat then ape. Ape is like all the way at the back, right? I don't know. Someone that studied evolution, let us know in the comments. Number 2. Flight. You may know of Psylocke's famous butterfly aura that surrounds her eyes and face while using her telekinetic abilities. Likewise, she can also use her telekinesis to give herself metaphorical wings and allow her to take flight, though she is also sometimes pictured with that neon pink butterfly wing-like aura on her back while soaring around. So sometimes it does actually look like she has wings, telekinetic wings, which is also kind of fitting considering how romantically close close she and fellow X-Men Angel have been over the years. This seems to be an ability that writers sometimes also forget about though, so she doesn't use it that frequently. You can see her take flight in the Uncanny X-Men series from 2016, volume number 4, if you want to see that, which I mean, who doesn't want to see Psylocke fly? It's super cool. Number 1. Invisibility. When you think of Psylocke, you may think of her stealth abilities. She is a spy, a ninja, an assassin, and has been known to shadow teleport. But what you might not think about when it comes to her stealth is her power of invisibility. Yes, she can turn invisible. This power comes from her telekinesis skills. Although it's not often seen, she has used it before in the comics. This, combined with her astral projection abilities, makes her an even more stealthy mutant than you might initially suspect, though as we've seen, it doesn't do anything when it comes to cloaking her from Mr. Fantastic. Unsurprisingly, trying to use invisibility powers to sneak up on a man who is married to the Invisible Woman is really, well, not the most effective way to use that ability. I'm sneaking and Reed Richards is like, I know you're here. I'm used to invisible people, it's kind of my thing.
Up next, number 5, the power of preach. It is undeniable that Captain America is a gifted orator. There's a reason why he's often in a leadership position. Dude is really good at motivating and inspiring people. It's kind of his whole shtick, considering his superhero persona in the first place. Let's quickly count down some of the more inspirational speeches of his over the years. In the MCU, there's the whole Price of Freedom speech in Captain America the Winter Soldier. He gave a powerful speech when turning down the presidency in the comics in Captain America issue 250. He even finds himself filming PSAs for high schools about detention, as seen in the MCU Spider-Man film. And then there's the whole whatever it takes speech in Endgame. Hell, even the Ultimate Universe Cap can give a good speech, although a mildly rude and offensive one. He went on a tangent about how the A on his helmet didn't stand for France after he was advised to surrender. Regardless of what it is he's saying, Cap can command a room, and can compel almost anyone's attention with his gift of the gab. Moving on to number 4, super accuracy. Once upon a time in Captain America Comics issue 3, the 3rd issue of his solo series that began in the 40s, Steve Rogers threw a sharp dinosaur bone at a foe and impaled him, murdering him. I mean, it was 1941, so a lot of stuff like this slipped under the radar prior to the Comics Code Authority. Ah, the golden age of comics. Anywho, the story takes place in a museum as Cap and Bucky attempt to stop 2 small-time robbers from thieving. The dude he kills is a guy named Lenny. He's a petty henchman who probably did not deserve to die, especially in that way. Regardless, that is some damn good accuracy, impaling the kid right through the heart with that bone. It's almost impressive if it wasn't so homicidal. Speaking of using objects to kill people, in at number 3, he can get homicidal with a shield. Steve Rogers has quite the bloody track record. Clearly. Aside from using dinosaur bones to impale lowly criminals, he's also used his shield to murder people too. So wholesome. I mean, it is kind of impressive though, isn't it? I mean, sure, it's made of vibranium, but using an object like that effectively to commit homicide is definitely a skill, right? Right. Anyway, Cap used his shield to help out superhero Union Jack when Jack's brother, Baron Blood, a vampire if the name didn't give it away, went on a rampage. Cap found himself having to permanently take care of the problem by decapitating him with his shield as Union Jack looked on, and as Baron Blood clawed at his chest too, to boot. Moving on to number 2, the Battle Van. You've heard of the Batmobile, the Quinjet, the Hell Cycle. You name it, but have you heard of the Battle Van? Aside from having a bit of a lackluster name, the Battle Van is more commonly known as Captain America's van, which isn't much better, is it? A product of the 80s, this rad custom-built van, a Chevy nonetheless, was a nondescript vehicle designed by Wakandans for Cap. I mean, I get it, it's really good when you're trying to be low-key, but it kinda looks like he just stole the Mystery Machine from Scooby-Doo and then spray painted it one color to avoid getting caught. Those dang kids. The van can actually change colors, might I add, but whatever. It can basically function as a base on the go for Cap. It has a mount for his motorcycle at the back because, you know, one vehicle wasn't enough, and even has a little cot if he feels like nap time. Oh. It is worth noting that an alternate reality version of Cap from Earth 600043 actually uses this van religiously, which is pretty great. And finally, in at number 1, he cannot get drunk. Because of Cap's incredibly fast metabolism thanks to the Super Soldier Serum, he has an immunity to a lot of things. The serum prevents the buildup of fatigue poisons in his muscles, his body is resistant to gases and hypnosis like we mentioned, and he has an immunity to alcohol, meaning he can never get drunk. Often his resistance to alcohol is played up as a joke in the comics or his cinematic appearances, but in a way, that kinda sucks, doesn't it? I mean, not saying that you need to get drunk at a party to have fun, but having the option to choose would be nice at least. He's not the only superhero who suffers from this ailment either. Deadpool has a similar problem thanks to his boosted regenerative healing factor.
Number 5, super smell. As Spider-Woman, Jessica Drew has heightened senses, but one you might be surprised to hear about is her super smell. Her smell is so good that she was able to tell that the Nick Fury she was talking to in New Avengers Volume 1, Issue 23 was an AI decoy, as opposed to the real thing. She commented to Maria Hill on her improvements to the model, but cited the smell as the thing that tipped her off. That's some Wolverine level sense of smell there. Unless S.H.I.E.L.'s AIs like reek of oil or something, which I sincerely doubt considering how many other people they have succeeded in fooling, this is pretty impressive. Number 4. Dimensional travel. Jessica ended up getting her very own dimensional watch following the Spider-Verse events. This device was listed as part of her equipment at the back of Spider-Gwen Volume 2, Issue 7. The weird thing though is that in that issue, it was Spider-Gwen's dimensional watch that went missing, not Jessica's. Yet Jessica was concerned about being without a way to teleport home after her and Silk of Earth 616 had joined Gwen on Earth 65 for brunch. Spider-Gwen's device was stolen, and Jessica Drew, Spider-Gwen, and Silk of Earth 616 had to team up to retrieve it. It's just really weird that at the end of this issue, it acknowledges that Jess has one, cause like she clearly didn't have it in that issue. If she found out that she did, she would have like teleported home to her baby in an instant. I am sure. She loves that baby. She loves it. Little baby Jerry. Pretty cute baby actually. Number 3. Pheromones. When Jessica Drew was first introduced, she struggled a lot to deal with other people. I mean, of course, she was basically raised in a tube and then later brainwashed by a Hydra into thinking that she'd been a spider, so kind of understand where that comes from. She was known as socially awkward and often written as shy. She ended up feeling isolated and removed from the world, though we later found out the reason she seemed to drive so many people away is because she unknowingly produced fear-inducing pheromones. This later was a forgotten power as Jessica took medication to help suppress it. Later it was implied that the extra pheromones she produced were actually seductive in nature. Or maybe she had just gotten better control of them? I don't know. But she definitely has used them to seduce people before. And once again later she decided to use a fragrance to neutralize and mask her pheromones instead. So this power is still not really often brought up or used, though one time she did use it to get Hulk to make her a sandwich. I'm not joking, that happened. Check it out. Number 2. Superhuman speed. Not only does Spider-Woman have superhuman strength like other spider people, but she also has superhuman speed. In Spider-Woman Volume 1 Issue 40, she is fighting the Flying Tiger. When he swings and misses her, he ends up puzzled. He wonders if she even moved and how he could have possibly missed her. Didn't see her move at all. Jessica reveals in a thought bubble that she is simply too fast for him to see, confessing that she can move faster than one's eyes. She also seems to be able to fall really fast in the comics for some reason. And that fight between her and Tiger has some crazy hilarious dialogue. If you haven't read it yet, you really should. No, Tiger, you're inept. I'm gonna use that insult on people. You're inept. Stop that. Number 1. Venom Blasts. A unique ability that Spider-Woman has that not many other spider people possess is her Venom Blasts. She can shoot bioelectric energy from her hands, which allows her to shock an assailant and often knock them out. This power has the ability to target multiple people, travel through metal as it is an electrical current, and even move through others and leap to another target, like lightning. And these Venom Blasts are powerful. She's used these powers before to hurt Null, Breaker of Worlds, stun an Aleph, and even kill someone. Accidentally, of course. She didn't mean to. She's like, nah, oops, killed ya.
Number 2. Scarlet Witch Famine. This Wanda comes from Earth 10082 and was transformed by Apocalypse into a horseman of the Apocalypse, Famine, which of course lent a whole new devastating arsenal of wasting powers to her already large power set. This character appeared as part of the Heroic Age event. This is another event dealing with time streams and scales and the like, featuring Kang the Conqueror. They at first appeared largely as a gasp moment for certain Avengers to be shocked that their future selves are horsemen, especially Spider-Man. He was taken aback. Angel becoming Archangel is still the coolest horseman plot. Share your fave down below. And in at number 1, we have reality warping. I've put this at number 1 because while this may be the ability most know the Scarlet Witch for, it is also one of the most controversial. This power was achieved via retcon. After Busiek had worked in Chaos Magic, Avengers Disassembled would then retcon her abilities to purely mutant, and they would place them in the reality warping vein. And she would be so powerful that she was on an Omega scale and she could alter anything, and she did. Firstly, aside from her kids, she created the House of M universe and then nearly erased all mutants from existence. However, these powers would be short-lived. Only a few years later in Children's Crusade, which would also reintroduce those kids, her powers would be re-established as magical, and her powers would be said to be amplified by an outside source, which is why she could do all the extra things she did in those storylines. This retcon. I'm not sure why it happened and then why it was so quickly undone. What do you prefer? Chaos magic or reality warping?
Number 10, super strength.
Bronze Tiger. Now the Amalgam universe has some mashups that people will never forget. I mean, here on this channel, we won't let you forget about Darkclaw, ever, even if you wanted to. But not every Amalgam was one that people felt was spot on, and some felt a little thrown together. Case in point, Bronze Tiger. So Bronze Tiger was a combination of Black Panther and Bronze Tiger, so just full on having the name of one of them, not even like Black Tiger or something like that. Also, Bronze Tiger started off as a villain, then transitioned into anti-hero, so he seems a bit of an odd matchup. The history is very brief and seems far more T'Challa, only now the name is Ben'Challa. Ben'Challa. B''N''Challa.
He might be immortal. It has been speculated that Sam is a member of the Externals, an immortal mutant group not to be confused with the Eternals, the race that Thanos and Eros belong to. Context time. The Externals are a rare subspecies of mutants who are immortal, are capable of rebirth, and can absorb power post-mortem. It varies, and most of them were X-Men antagonists over the years. Each External represents an intangible concept like despair, fortitude, wisdom, opportunity, patience, corruption, the list goes on. So why is Sam presumed to be an External? Because of his ability to come back to life after being killed, as seen in X-Force issue 9 from 1993. While his status as an External is not clear, and Cable has even stated his belief that Sam is not an External, despite stating in the past that he was before, his awakening was something that was felt by all of the other Externals when it happened. It's also worth noting that he died twice over the years. And the intangible concept that he's associated with is hope, so, oh.
Number 4.
Three, Black Panda. Welcome back to the world of Peter Porker, the spectacular Spider-Ham, world of quirky Looney Tunes-esque characters and plenty of animal puns. If you love those two things, then this book is for you. On this universe, instead of Black Panther, we have Black Panda, and he doesn't appear too often, but has all the abilities of Black Panther, or at least that's what it seems like. But he's all cute and chibified and looks a little bit like Mickey Mouse. Kinda, sorta, a smidge. Either way, Black Panda's super cute.
Number 2. Chemical resistance. You just want to move the fight away from a certain area.
Number 10. Super speed thinking. Evidently, super speed doesn't just affect how fast your body moves, but it affects the mind. Quicksilver is able to think faster than the average human, allowing him to perceive reality faster and respond accordingly. And if you think about it, this is pretty much essential to anyone with super speed. If you can't perceive what's coming at you when you're moving, you'd just be running into everything. In fact, as a result, Quicksilver has an arrogant personality, which writer Peter David explains is a result of this, stating that Quicksilver lives in a world filled with people who don't know how to use cash machines and want to know all the ways to send packages to Africa and can never get your order right in a Burger King unless you repeat it several times. That would tend to make you feel very superior to everyone and very impatient with everyone. I like that. That's really well thought out. In fact, it relates to his next power. Number 9. Photographic memory. So, with that kind of mind, you need to be able to take in details at a faster rate, which essentially gives Quicksilver a photographic memory. Now, you might be thinking, photographic memory is cool, but it's not a superpower. But you might not know this, but there is no evidence suggesting that photographic memory even exists, which, given the circumstances, would actually make it a real superpower. So, I'm giving it to Quicksilver. Number 8. Speed epidemic. In the Marvel Zombies world, Quicksilver is actually instrumental for the widespread of the epidemic, due to the fact that his super speed allowed him to infect a large amount of people in a remarkably short time. Quicksilver effectively made it impossible to contain the zombie virus just because of how rapidly he was able to spread it. So Quicksilver may be the most effective zombie in history.
Number 7. He is a martial arts master. Once again, thanks to the years of intense training with Captain America, Sam is a master in judo, karate, and many other various art styles of martial arts, making him one of the most dangerous fighters in the world. Because of these skills, he has had the upper hand against some of the most well-trained opponents in the world, and he was even able to take down superhumans as strong as the Wrecking Crew members.
Number 6. Superior breathing. So Quicksilver is able to move comfortably in environments where oxygen is reduced to a point where an ordinary human could no longer breathe, indicating that his breathing ability, something essential to any runner, is enhanced by his mutation in some capacity, which would also indicate that he has superhuman stamina.
Number 5. Expert marksman. Now, despite not having the super accuracy that Hawkeye possesses, Sam still manages to do pretty well for himself, especially when a majority of his shooting is done from the sky. As seen in the MCU, he carries a number of smaller firearms on him for some powerful long-range attacks, and he rarely misses.
Number 4. Power restoration. So, after Quicksilver lost his powers, he exposed himself to the Terrigen Mist to regain his abilities. However, he also took Terrigen crystals into his body, which also gave him the ability to restore mutant powers that were taken away. That said, this process could usually prove fatal. Still, risk aside, it is a pretty impressive power.
Number 3. His regenerative healing factor. Once again, focusing on Joaquin, thanks to Malice's experiments, he was also turned into a vampire, making him a human-falcon vampire hybrid. Now, this regenerative power comes from the vampire portion of him and has allowed Joaquin to survive fatal wounds, even ones as serious as having his head bitten off. It's even theorized that it could help him regrow parts of his body were he to lose them. There is a major drawback to this ability though. It prevents him from ever being human again, and that's because avian carriers of vampirism don't suffer from a lot of side effects that afflict humans, and only some of those aspects of that condition were transferred to Joaquin. But I mean, hey, if it keeps him alive and fighting, there's really no reason to complain, right?
Number 2. Transfer molecular vibrations. So Quicksilver is able to vibrate his molecules at high speeds, but he's also able to transfer those vibrations to other objects, which can cause it to explode or collapse. And this is a skill he uses to escape prison upon regaining his powers in X Factor, The Quick and the Dead. And of course, this ability to destabilize his molecules allows him to walk through solid objects. And number 1. Flight. Yeah, I've only seen him use this ability once, and that was in the original X-Men comics way back in issue 44. In an attempt to give chase to Angel, he announces that he's recently developed the ability to fly, but can only remain airborne for more than a few seconds. By all means correct me if I'm wrong, but from what I've researched, this hasn't come up since then. Still, it happened, and given its few appearances and obscurity, it's topping my list.
Number 10. Leadership. While he might not be the leader we'd all like for the X-Men, Scott Summers is more often the one that his fellow mutants need. Professor Xavier actually trained Cyclops for the role since day one as a young mutant who had been there since the beginning. So when people ask if he deserves to be a leader, the answer should be an emphatic yes, as he has been training for this role pretty much his entire life. A master tactician, Cyclops usually has his eyes on the bigger picture when it comes to problem solving, meaning sometimes, in order to achieve something good, he can be willing to do something that other heroes might deem as bad or downright dastardly. He kills people. He remade X-Force into a team of child assassins. He became a martyr on purpose, sacrificing himself because he knew the younger mutants needed someone to become their symbol to rally around. So, while we may not always approve of his actions, the bottom line is Cyclops is still one of the best when it comes to prime leaders in the Marvel Universe. While a very different character, he's on like a Captain America level of leadership. And that's like people universally agree to that, so not making that up. I know you're all thinking it. Number 9. Poker Master. Remy's love of cards comes from his thieving background. He grew up stealing and gambling and actually earned quite a bit of money doing so, but more about his wealth another time. As such, he has an insane level of skill as a poker player. We see him beat out his X-Men squad in a friendly tournament in X-Men Volume 2, Issue 48. It comes down to him and Sam Guthrie, aka Cannonball, who insisted he'd actually never played before, but actually has been playing poker for years with his siblings before coming to the X-Men. Yeah, I've tried that before, Sam, with Catan, so I know your tricks. And he is actually a bit of a pro himself. But even he is no match for Remy. When it seems like Gambit accidentally charged the cards on purpose to make them explode so he wouldn't have to reveal his full final hand, we find out that although he forfeits, he had the winning hand, and chose to throw the game in favor of Sam, as Storm picks up the remnants of his smoking ace, which would have given him a royal flush to Sam's full house. And if you play poker like I do, you should know, royal flush is like the best you can get. Royal flush. Number 8. Super reflexes and agility. Have you ever noticed how Gambit almost never misses when throwing one of his cards? Or how he almost never gets hit when others are aiming for him? This is because he has superior reflexes and agility. His movements are basically acrobatic. This helps him as a Master Thief as well, often allowing him to sneak into places and out unnoticed. And it allows him to dodge lasers on a Matrix level, and bullets on a Matrix level actually as well. He has also been able to avoid getting hit by projectiles himself and save others from getting hit by simply being quick enough to catch them, and often throw them back at the people that aim them at him. Number 7. Bojutsu. When Gambit first made his appearance in Uncanny X-Men Volume 1, Issue 266, he actually was not seen using his famous playing cards. Instead, we met Gambit with metal spikes in hand, almost like darts. Like many of his fellow mutants, first appearances can be deceiving, and many of the X-Men needed some time to evolve and settle before becoming the iconic characters we know them as today. I mean, look at how much Beast has changed from his first appearance. And in fact, while we've come to know Gambit for his explosive playing cards, he is also skilled with weapons as well, specifically his bow staff. His accuracy both with his staff and anything he chooses to turn into a projectile is impressive. He rarely misses his targets, and even is accurate and skilled enough to use his staff to deflect bullets, and powerful enough to destroy a Danger Room bot with one swift blow of his staff. Number 6. Savant. Aside from his skill with his staff, Remy LeBeau is also skilled with his hands as well. I mean, his fists. His fists. He is a master of savate. What does that mean? It means that he is a French kickboxing master. What makes French kickboxing different from English kickboxing? Well, I'm not sure. I assume it's similar, but in French? Oui, oui, mon chéri. It's actually like standard kickboxing, but it's more graceful. Fun fact. His hits would also be more powerful using this technique, as he has a supercharged metabolism that makes his strikes land with more force. Nick Fury even said that Gambit was one of the best hand-to-hand fighters he had ever seen. Number 5. Hypnotic Charm. Have you ever wondered why so many ladies have the hots for Gambit? Well, it could be because of this subtle and sometimes lesser known ability. Remy is charming just on his own, but he also possesses a power known as Hypnotic Charm. This power allows him to have slight control over another being through the power of suggestion, basically like Cajun Jedi mind tricks. He can suggest something to you that you might be inclined to follow through with or agree with him on. Some have even suggested that he may have used his influence to make Rogue fall for him. However, this power is not particularly strong, so it is unlikely that this theory is true, and more likely that the two just fell in love organically. Because as soon as someone becomes aware of this power, it ceases to work on them any longer. and it's likely that Rogue, after all this time, would both know about Remy's hypnotic and natural charms. Number 4. Mental defense. Gambit's ability to manipulate kinetic energy means that he is almost always surrounded by it, which grants him an electrostatic field. This basically acts like a mental shield and protects him from those who would probe his thoughts. Professor X once likened trying to get into Remy's mind to trying to hold on to a bunch of snakes, and Psylocke has also struggled when it comes to breaking through Gambit's mental defenses. It doesn't help that Gambit also specifically will focus on misleading thoughts when he feels someone trying to make their way into his mind, which only makes attempting to use telepathy on him feel even more impossible and frustrating. Number 3. Healing factor. While this has never been explicitly confirmed, we have seen Gambit both withstand and recover from a number of devastating blows within a short amount of time. It has been suggested that he may be able to harness kinetic energy in order to heal himself, which might also explain in how Bishop's timeline he survived long enough to be an elderly man who remembered the X-Men and was known as the Witness. If he was actually the Witness, that is. That theory has really never been fully confirmed or denied. Number 2. Molecular manipulation. On the alternate Earth of 9921, Gambit becomes New Sun. New Sun is basically Gambit with his powers unlocked to his full potential. This version of him was so powerful he ended up killing his Earth's Phoenix. His kinetic powers far surpass those of his Earth 616 counterpart, to the point that he can manipulate kinetic energy on a molecular level. He could heat up molecules or cool them down, and could stop a person dead in their tracks. And he no longer had to touch objects to make them explode. He could even transform himself into energy, manipulating his own molecules and converting himself into energy waves. Number 1. Toxic conversion. During Gambit's run as Apocalypse's Horseman of Death, Gambit had this power. He agreed to be one of Apocalypse's horsemen, believing that Apocalypse would be the salvation of the mutants, and that if Apocalypse turned on them, that Gambit would be able to stop him. Fortunately, didn't quite work out as Remy had hoped, and he ended up actually attacking his former teammates, the X-Men. As a result of this transformation, he gained the power to transform air into deadly poison, even once threatening to do so to his own master, Apocalypse, after regaining his sense of self and remembering who he truly was. Thanks for watching, Nerd Squad. Are there any powers you feel like we left out? What are some of his powers that you think make Gambit super cool? How do you feel about the fact that Gambit's solo movie project involving Channing Tatum was cancelled? Let us know in the comments below. I personally was looking forward to hearing what a Cajun Channing Tatum would sound like, but I also feel like Gambit is a really hard one to cast. Number 10. Kinetic energy. While some who are less familiar with Gambit just think of him as a man with card tricks, the truth is that he is so much more than that. His power isn't just throwing explosive cards, though it might appear that way to the uninformed eye. Gambit's true powers are to kinetically charge any object that he comes into contact with, setting it to explode on impact or time the explosion. He once charged his gum that he was chewing in his mouth and spat it at an enemy when it seemed that he would otherwise be a goner, with a sword at his throat. Ooh. Guess Gambit is lucky he wasn't in Singapore, where importation and selling of gum is illegal. True facts. While he may seem super in control of these powers, he actually constantly fears that he isn't, and even made a deal with Mr. Sinister to help him have more control over them. Yet in the comics, the control he does demonstrate is pretty impressive, making one wonder what a fully in control Gambit would be capable of. We're getting there, we're getting there.
9. Shapeshifting. Rogue has absorbed the powers of her adoptive mother Mystique a handful of times, but not for the reasons that you'd expect. While she did gain Mother Dearest's powers, Rogue touching Mystique was for other reasons. She wanted to better understand her mother, adoptive mother, rather. As you know, Rogue doesn't just absorb abilities, but thoughts, memories, etc. In one case though, outside of the comics, we did get to see Rogue use Mystique's powers. Sort of. In the X-Men the Animated Series, after Rogue had absorbed Carol Danvers and the latter's psyche was becoming the more prominent of the two, she ended up using Mystique's powers to shapeshift into her previous body. You got a complicated past with your mother, so I'm just gonna use your mother's powers to make you look like me. Moving on to number 8. Death. Prior to Rogue being able to control her powers, a lingering touch of hers could be deadly. Typically for those who had superpowers or were powerful mutants, her touch would cause damage and might even put them into a coma. But in the case of someone with a physiology like Carol Danvers, psyches were merged. But what about for a regular human? It's no bueno. Rogue's touch is practically the touch of death. For regular non-powered humans, Rogue's touch could very well be fatal, sucking their strength at an accelerated and alarming rate that our human bodies cannot handle. Moving on to less depressing territory, and at number 7, she can manipulate ice. Wonder whose powers she absorbed to get this little trick. If it wasn't already obvious, this skill set of Rogue's was the byproduct of touching X-Men teammate Bobby Drake, aka Iceman. It's a power that she's borrowed from Bobby on multiple occasions, not only for use in combat but for other means too. Bobby's ice manipulation powers, which might I add are Omega level mutant abilities, allow him to decrease the thermal energy around him in order to create ice structures. His creations will not break unless he wills them to. So you can imagine how how this was useful for Rogue in Avengers vs. X-Men, when a whole lot of rebuilding was required after a failed attempt to use the Phoenix Force occurred. Moving on to another X-Men member here in at 6, phasing. Okay, personally Kitty Pryde's phasing powers were always the mutant ability that I wanted growing up, so I am a big fan of this number. In Uncanny X-Men issue 194, the X-Men are almost bested by villain Nimrod when Kitty Pryde has an idea, and it's a good one too. Out for the count and being carried around by Rogue, Kitty decides to push her head up against Rogue's, forcing the mutant to absorb her powers, psyche, thoughts, and memories of her teammate. This spawns a greater plan in which Rogue then absorbs Wolverine, Colossus, and Nightcrawler's powers, using them to attack the Sinister robot, smashing it to bits. Although Nimrod ends up rebuilding itself and teleporting away, it's still a pretty big win for the X-Men. Up next, number 5, weather manipulation. Storm is the second Omega level mutant on our list whose powers Rogue has absorbed, and she's another teammate whose powers have been borrowed on more than one occasion. Now, the first wasn't actually borrowed. They were in battle against one another and Rogue was still doing that whole villain thing. She would fight Storm and steal her powers. Guess that kind of stuck with Aurora, because the next time that Rogue would find herself borrowing the weather manipulator's abilities was when Storm had to offer her powers willingly to Rogue in Uncanny X-Men issue 185. But it wasn't for combat, and it wasn't used the way that Rogue used Bobby's powers. Instead, it was in order to give Rogue a new perspective, opening the young mutant up to trusting Storm and seeing the beauty that the Earth had to offer, versus Rogue's prior cynically inclined outlook. You brought them closer together. Moving on to number 4, reality warping. So Scarlet Witch is arguably one of the most powerful superheroes in the Marvel Universe, albeit being slightly unstable at times. Rogue has stolen her powers on a few occasions, but perhaps the most memorable one took place in Uncanny Avengers issue 2, volume 2. After absorbing Wanda's powers, Rogue had some trouble with it, the power being what she called a, I quote, confusing idiot power. She was unable to make use of the abilities right from the get-go, and she couldn't control it either. Nothing actually happens with these powers aside from her hands glowing. Why? Well, Wanda explains it as Rogue lacking the imagination to use her reality warping powers. Kinda savage, but does make sense. Up next at 3, physical trait absorption. We mentioned this ability in our intro, but we want to talk about the extent of this power of Rogue's, because often it's entirely involuntary. During the comic Fantastic Four vs. the X-Men issue 4, Rogue absorbs the Human Torch's powers. Now this doesn't only give her pyrokinesis, it gives her his fiery form that allows her to fly. While Rogue does make use of this for a brief period of time, she notes that this fire form completely obliterated her outfit, which was not fireproof. She could not control that. Sue Storm ends up using her powers to create a force field around Rogue, snuffing her out and leaving her completely naked. It's a bit of a distant shot of her naked though, so. Another time Rogue has absorbed a physical trait was when she absorbed Nightcrawler's powers on an alternate Earth. Earth 161. In this case, Rogue's powers did something a little unconventional. She ended up switching powers and appearance entirely with Kurt, which gave her blue skin and a tail, along with his abilities. This did not go over too well with Rogue. She kinda resented it. Up next, number 2, Rogue God of Thunder. Once upon a time, Rogue smushed her hand into Thor's face and stole his powers. I love the drawing in this panel. This was back in Rogue's more villainous early days, specifically in Avengers Annual Issue 10 when she faced off against Earth's mightiest heroes. Thor swoops Rogue off her feet, declaring he, I quote, knowest not who thou art. What follows is Rogue metaphorically slapping him, stating her name, and saying that he had her eternal gratitude for handing her victory on the proverbial silver platter, because she stole his powers and was about to whoop everyone. Oh, Thor. Sometimes his naivety is wonderfully endearing. And finally, in at number 1, she can recall past powers. In X-Men Volume 2, issue 107 from 2000, Rogue's powers mutated further. Not on their own though. This was due to an induced mutation by a telepathic mutant Skrull named Zakan. Now think of her as the Skrull equivalent of Charles Xavier. While it was not intentional, Zakan actually attempted to activate Rogue's powers to evade bounty hunters, the side effects allowed for Rogue to recall previously absorbed powers. And because of this, Rogue found herself having difficulty controlling which powers manifested when, occasionally boasting Wolverine's claws and Cyclops' optic blasts. This was temporary though. Alright, there we have it friends, what are your thoughts and feels about Rogue?